A lot of people say that you gotta make an irrevocable decision when you want to change. But that may be 10 years later, you look down, you look back at that decision like, that wasn't the best decision.
Yes.
So it's revocable.
Every decision is revocable. Some decisions you hold on to for a lifetime. Some decisions are not meant for a lifetime. Some decisions are meant for a season. The objective is to know when it's working and when it's not working, and how to pivot. But all decisions are revocable. Some things you do, you can't take back. So it's important to understand that in making the decision. What are the consequences of making this decision? How is this decision going to inform my behavior? Because some of the things you do, you can't take back. But not every decision you make is a lifelong decision. Making a decision today doesn't mean you never take it back or never pivot or change your mind, etc. You can do that. Some decisions you have to live with for the rest of your life, but not every decision. For example, getting married. The idea behind that, traditionally at least, was till death do us part. That's a decision that you were making for life. Which is why it was important for you to be very careful and take the necessary precaution before making that decision. But other decisions are not so heavy. You can change your career, for example, throughout the course of your life. That's not an irrevocable decision. But some decisions lead to behaviors that are irrevocable. So it's important to make decisions that inform behavior that you can live with. Although we all have regrets, or at least we think we have regrets when we're younger, we want to minimize them to the best of our ability. And I say we think we have regrets when we're younger, because some older people would say that they don't have any regrets. They have a certain level of understanding at a certain point in life where whatever they didn't do wasn't for them to do. And they really made peace with that. Whereas others would say things like, I wish I slowed down. I wish I didn't work as much. I wish I realized that all of the things don't matter in the end. And I wish I lived that way. Some people say that. A lot of people say that. They know, well, they understand that. But they don't live like they know that. It's just a concept for them. Minimize regrets. I try to.
To say in life you have more regrets of the things you don't do than the things that you do.
Exactly. That's why it's important to make a decision. Sometimes a fear attached to making a decision. The fear, one, not understanding that decisions are inevitable. Right? But even in this example, right? Irrevocable decisions. Now you're like, oh, I gotta make this decision. I gotta keep it for the rest of my life. How do I make this decision? What's going on? And all of this thought keeps you from making a decision. So you never actually do anything that you want to do, or that you may have wanted to do, because you didn't consciously decide. But in not consciously deciding, you made a decision to not decide. So now your life is being controlled by others, because you don't have any direction in your own life that's going to govern your mannerisms. You're not controlling what you can control. You're giving up that control. An example of this would be someone saying that you disrespected them, when that doesn't really exist. The only way someone can disrespect you is if you give them jurisdiction over your feelings. No one can make you sad unless you give them the responsibility of deciding when you're sad and when you're not. They can say whatever they want to say. They can do whatever they want to do. But you decide how you feel about it. No one else decides that for you. But if you don't make that decision, then they decide it for you. And oftentimes we don't think about this. So we find ourselves in a position where we're saying someone else hurt our feelings, not realizing that we gave them the power to do so. We're not accepting the fact that we gave them the power to do so, because it happened on a subconscious level. How did that happen? Because you didn't take responsibility over your feelings. So make a decision regarding everything in your life that you can control. Everything. And sometimes these things are hard to remember, I understand. because they're so subtle. But it's the subtleties that control your life. Because habits are subtle. The consequence may not be subtle, but habits are very subtle. That's why it's important to develop them, because they don't require so much energy. You're doing it on autopilot. And when you're doing something on autopilot, it's happening or seemingly happening in a very subtle manner because you're not thinking about it. But these are the things that actually control your life. So make it a habit to make a decision to control your life consciously until it becomes subconscious. But you're doing it in a way that actually serves you.
A lot of what I do comes from a place of like low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering whether that causes to create bad habits. Bad habits cause a low self-esteem.
Both. They reinforce one another. The habit typically comes first. The habit is connected to your identity, but your identity is connected to your philosophies. And oftentimes you don't develop your philosophy. Your philosophy is given to you. That's why it's important to think about what you must believe in order to feel a certain way. If something happens and you feel a certain way, it's important to ask yourself, what must I believe to feel this way? How do I frame the situation? And oftentimes that framing is not coming from you, especially when you're a child, for example. A lot of what you believe and how you think, especially as a child, is really dominated by the environment. So you get your beliefs, you get your philosophies from the environment. I remember being a kid and thinking that certain words were like fighting words. I didn't come up with that myself. People would say these words and I would fight them because the environment told me that's what you should do. You should be offended by this. I didn't realize that I was taking that from the environment. I didn't take all of it from the environment, meaning the environment may have had a list of 100 fighting words, which are really phrases. I may have taken 20 out of the 100, but I still took something. It took for me to realize or acknowledge the discomfort in that, to decide I didn't want to do that anymore. But that was me beginning to become conscious of it and understand that it's important for me to control what I can't control. Thankfully, I was still young, and young enough for this to be instilled in me at an early age, meaning young enough for me to start practicing not engaging and thinking that these phrases were worthy of me fighting someone and changing how I responded to it. But essentially, those beliefs initially did not come from me. I had to change them as I went along, realizing that this doesn't serve me, realizing that this doesn't represent me. I'm doing this because I think I should be doing this because this is what the environment says to do. And it's saying to do that because if you don't do this, then you're perceived a certain way. And once you're perceived that way, it's going to lead to other issues. So nip it in the bud in the beginning. But you don't get that context when you're younger. You just get these are fighting words. And so you should fight. I understood it more as I aged. But again, initially those beliefs didn't come from me. And because I didn't have those beliefs later on in life, because I said to myself, this doesn't really make sense, this doesn't feel right to me, this doesn't align with who I am, how I identify myself. Once I was able to accumulate enough of these aspects of the culture that didn't resonate with me, I understood that perhaps I should relocate. And I relocated. Your habits reinforce the reality that you create for yourself. They create the reality, right? And that reality reinforces the habit because the habit is attached to your identity. So it's a loop. You identify as a certain person. You have these habits to reinforce your identity because no one wants to feel like they don't know who they are. So for example, if you're someone who has low self-esteem, that's somehow aligned with your identity, how you see yourself. Perhaps you've adopted an identity of a person with a low self-esteem. And that can be a few different archetypes. But regardless to which one it is, it's someone with low self-esteem. Then you create habits that reinforce that. How does it reinforce that? It creates a reality that meets the standard of the archetype. It creates a reality that makes the person feel like they're not confident. So if I'm, for example, an archetype of a person that believes that I have low self-esteem, I create the habit of doing things that I don't excel at. And doing things that I don't excel at make me feel like I'm not worthy. So for example, I'm not a good basketball player, but I keep going to the basketball court. I keep getting dominated on the court, which reinforces, yeah, you're not good at this. Then it's like, yeah, but I'm also not good at anything. Why do you feel like you're not good at anything? Because you have a habit of doing things that you don't excel at. Why do you do things that you don't excel at? Because you think that doing things you don't excel at will make you much more of a well-rounded person. But you don't stick with any of these things long enough to get good at them. You just keep changing because you think doing things you're not good at is going to make you a well-rounded person. When in all actuality, the fact that you keep changing the thing that you're doing makes it so that you don't ever become good at any of them, which reinforces the fact that you should have a low self-esteem. Because clearly, you're not good at anything, which reinforces the identity. Habits create your experience, and that experience reinforces the identity, which thus reinforces the habit. So it's a loop. It's not necessarily the habit creating the low self-esteem or the low self-esteem creating the habit. They reinforce each other. And it comes from how you identify yourself. And part of how you identify yourself comes from your interaction with others. Because a large part of your beliefs come from your environment. And your beliefs are what help you to frame the different experiences in your life. Because your beliefs dictate your perspective.